Hey, thank you for watching this video. If you like the content, please give me a thumbs up and subscribe to my YouTube channel. And also please check out my new online learning platform, designupgrade.thinkofic.com. For more information, check out the end of the video or watch the promotion video in the playlist. And now have fun with the tutorial. Hey, so let's get started with this tutorial. Now we want to draw the first two floor plans of the Tadao under Azuma House. And this is a preview of basically what we're going to draw in this tutorial and what we're going to end up with. Now we're going to draw the first two floor plans as I told you and add some details, add some text, add some annotations so we have a better understanding of those floor plans, and then we can continue on to build up the sections and then the 3D model. Okay, so let's get started. Again, this is the preview. Now we will change and I'm going to open up a new Rhino. Super. Now that we have our layer set, let's bring up the first image so we can reference our 2D drawing to that. I'm going to quickly go into my top view. I am in shaded. As you can see, you can be in wireframe. Sorry, I actually am in wireframe, which is fine for the 2D drawings. And we want to go to reference image, make sure that this is selected, and then we say picture. That's basically all we have to do. Now we say picture, and this will open up a pop-up window, and you can already define, basically, you have to save the images from the browser. You can also just use the images that I linked up to this video, and then you go and select that image that you want to reference into Rhino. If you say open, and then you're ready to go. I'm not going to take the origin for my start rectangle. I'm going to place it somewhere else so I'm not blocked by my reference image, but we can always, adjust that at any given point. Now I've referenced this image. You can see it's actually fairly good quality-ish, yeah? This is going to be the reference image that we want to look at if you want to draw our 2D plans and our sections. This whole design, if I go to my construction drawings here, is made up of 3 rectangles which are equally scaled and spaced. So if I just quickly draw it just to show it to you, you can see that if I define my rectangle, let's say so, and then I just copy that rectangle, you can see that it's more or less made up of this perfect 3 rectangles, right? And the way that this is done is that our rectangle here has the dimension of, in the x-axis of 4.7, the middle axis, and the middle axis of our Y direction is going to be 3.3. So that's how we can understand that. Now let's actually go here and draw our first, let's say, proportions of this house. I'm going to go to rectangle, and this time I'm in my construction layer. I'm going to press 0, so that references my origin, and then I'm going to define the first dimension in my x-axis, which is 4.7. I say enter, and now I'm free to define my y-axis, which is 3.3 meters, that is. I press that. I've defined my first, let's say, construction line. And now I'm just going to say array linear. You say select that object and you say how many types you want. I want 3, as I can just type in 3. And then I can just, more or less array them linear. So I have 3 identical rectangles now created. Now this is like the basic massing of our geometry that we want to draw. That's why it's in the construction layer. And now what we can do is we can add guides. Now this is something new in Rhino 6 that you can actually do that. You know that maybe from Illustrator or Adobe, you can just create infinite lines or guidelines, which you can always reference if you're drawing line types. So just type in add guides. This will bring up the new command. Basically what it wants to know is a base point and then the linear dimension of that guideline. So if I just, take this line in the y-axis, I will create this infinite line, as you can see, and it will be always there for me to reference. Now I press enter and it's gone, yeah. But if I would now toggle any kind of line or geometry, you can see that this line or guideline will appear, yeah, which is quite handy. You can always reference yourself to that and create your lines from that. Now I also want to continue on to adding those guidelines, so I will add guides, and I actually want to reference all of my construction lines here. So I want to have those middle axis of my walls here. And I'm just quickly just going to define that. So just make sure you also do that you have in the end, if I turn off my grid with F7 and I want to do my line, I actually have those guidelines now here. What I also want to do is I want to add guidelines in the middle of my geometry. So I always have that symmetry axis if you want. So I will say add guide, and I will just catch the middle here and draw my line here. I catch the middle here and draw my guide there. Enter, and now you have a good number of guidelines, which will help you now to basically draw it up. But this will all make sense as we continue on. Now we have done that. We have generated our first construction lines, and we have added some guidelines, and now we can actually go to draw geometry. So we want to draw the first wall types, right? And there's a number of ways that you can actually do that. Aim here is that we want to make offsets of this guy. And there's, of course, just to do offset curve, you just do an offset and then you select both sides. The thing is that you would have to do it for each geometry individually. Now you can also use the multiple offset, which is quite interesting. So offset multiple. Here you have the chance to select all of your geometry. But first we want to make sure that we hit the distance, and we type in 0.075, which is 7.5 centimeters. I press enter. And then I select all of my geometry. This could be 100 rectangles, for instance. Press enter. And now I have to just choose the side, outside or inside of my geometry. First, I do the outside. I do that. And I go here to select. I do select my previous selection. So my previous selection was those rectangles, the guidelines. Go back to standard, and I do offset multiple again. And this time I'm going to press inside. So now I can turn off my construction lines here. And you can see we have generated this first set of walls, right? So this is already quite handy. And now we can continue on. What we want to do now is to actually, first of all, define all the holes in my boundary walls, let's say. So if I would quickly change to my drawing here, you can see that we have those windows, and in the wall there are these window holes and this entry holes, and that's what we want to draw now, and then we will add the block details to that. So I'm going to quickly switch back to my drawing. I want to create these two windows here, and I'm just going to create the first rectangle, which is the opening of those windows. Just going to say rectangle, and you can see my lines are back here. And I want to start from this middle axis. That's where I want to start from. And I can use the 3-point method for this. So 3 points, just hit that. I'm going to go here, and then with my smart track, I have this point referenced. As you can see, it highlights. And I define my second point. And now I want to make sure that I just type in 0.33. Enter. And now I've created my first window opening. And now I just need to position that correctly, right? So from that middle axis, if I would move that, this is the length that it has to be shifted is 0.245. That's a basic length. So you just do that and press enter. Now you want to make a copy of this. You just make a copy to the end here, and you take that guy and you just move it, this time 0.15. Yeah? And that is, in a nutshell, your two openings here. And we of course will add more detail, but that for now is good. And now what we could do is just take those guys and just mirror them. So the command mirror, and now we can use any of our symmetry lines and select those guys and say mirror again, and use again the symmetry line to place them on those 4 wall openings. Now if I would go back to my image here quickly, and let me just bring it down, you can see that there's one instance where you actually don't have that window openings, which is here my kitchen situation. Now in that kitchen situation, I actually don't want those windows to be there, so I delete them. That's what I will do. And if we continue on and take my drawing here, we have now constructed these openings. Let's say now we want to create this opening here. Now for this, we will use again a rectangle method, but this time I will hit rectangle and I will say center. And I will hit my lines here, my AddGuides, I will use them. And now I have to define the first dimension in X and then the Y. And the X is going to be 0.15. That is the width of my walls. And notice that defining that, it will also dimension it on both sides using that threshold. If I press enter, I'm now free to define my y-axis, and this is 0.8, which is 80 centimeters. Press enter, and I have now created my entrance, let's say. And the same things we can do here. So the first rectangle that we want to actually draw is the rectangle of our window opening. So to say rectangle, I do my center method. I catch the center point here. The first thing I'm going to type is 1.5, enter, and now the window opening is not 1.33, but it's 1.52. So 0.520, not 1, otherwise that's going to be big. Press enter, and now we have to first of all move this guy, let's say to our mid guide here, so the middle point, and now we want to move it in the y-axis just by using my gumball. Maybe I press in 0.22, enter, and now I can just mirror this rectangle, and now I have all of my basic openings set. And now I want to show you a super cool feature, which is called the CurveBoolean. Now we want to create very clean, let's say, walls out of this, right? And we could, of course, go and use the trim method. So you could just select everything and hit trim, and you just basically trim off the stuff that you don't want. It is a good method, of course, but the thing that is not that nice is that you will remain with, let's say, shattered lines, which you then have to select and join again. There's another cool feature now that I want to actually show you, which is the CurveBoolean. So if you just type in CurveBoolean, you can now select everything, press enter, and now you just have to click inside of that what you want to have returned as a wall. And you can already see in the preview, it's going to highlight that. And the cool thing now is I can actually create even this, joined wall situations that I couldn't have maybe before. So I can, if I don't want to have that, I can click again and it will go back. But if I want to have that, I can just continue on. And you can see as I go along here, I am quite precise in the way that I want to create my walls here. So let's say I'm happy with this and I press enter. Now they are still selected. What we could do now is either lock it because I want to delete some stuff, or we could just move it away. So maybe if I just move it down, let's say 5 meters, I have now my new clean closed wall geometry, as you can see here. And here I have my line work that I've been doing before. Now what we could do is just simply take that, delete it, and I will just put this guy up 5 back, and I have now created my clean wall types using the CurveBoolean. Okay, so we just generated the walls, and now we're going to bring in some more detail. The way that we're going to do this is using blocks. Now blocks, again, is a super useful mechanism that you can use, and it's basically creating an instance, an element that you can always kind of redraw or add some more detail, and you can make copy of those instances and they will all react the same. So basically you're creating a very, very intelligent element, let's say a door kind of 2D drawing. And if you go into the block, you can change anything, and anything that has been linked to this element, or if you had copies of those, they will update also. Again, this is abstract, so actually let's draw them. Let's use blocks to draw windows and get a better understanding of what this instance can do. Now I'm going to go to my block, 2D blocks, and we want to draw the windows. So I'm going to select that. And now I want to do actually a nesting of elements that go into the windows layer. And that's the way that we want to do that, is adding new sublayer. And here we're going to write frames. Now we want to create frames, and we will put that in this layer. And I'm going to go to color, and let's say we would say dark gray is the frame color. Now I want to add another one, so I could just add new sublayer. And you see something weird happened. It's creating something in the frame layer, and that's maybe not what I want. So I have a sublayer in my sublayer. This could be very confusing, so I'm just going to delete that. So what I want to do actually is I want to go and select the frames, and here I just want to say new layer. And now I'm actually on the equal, let's say, structure, and I can add the glass layer. And then something I want to add is the hidden. So I also have a hidden lines, let's say, in that layer. And I want to have one that is called base point. We always need a base point for our blocks, so that's very important now. I want to give the glass a cyan color so we can always see that. And the hidden can be gray color, continuous, no, it should be hidden. And the base point is a point, so we don't really care, right? Now we want to draw the first block, and we already need to do it once, and then we can just copy and reference those blocks that we just created. What we want to do is actually first create our frames, right? So the frame is, let's say, 3 centimeters thick and is about the half of our wall thickness, which would be 7.5 centimeters. So that's the first thing I want to draw, and I can use my rectangle method and use this time again maybe 3 points, and I can just go up here, and you can see that I have my AddGuide here, so I can actually catch this guy, and then I say 0.03, which is 3 centimeters. Press enter. I have created my first frame here. Now what I want to do is actually add some more detail. So this is going to be copied, and what I want to do now is I want to take those two guys and I want to move them inside my wall. So there's a little slight, something carved out of the wall, which is usually the case where you put your frames inside. And what I want to do now on my hidden lines, I'm just going to create one line which goes from that wall opening to the wall opening here. So as you zoom in, you can already see it's dashed that line, and we can control the width again later on. And what I want to do is select those guys and make a mirror copy. I make sure that copy is yes, and I just mirror that guy. Now this is our basic framing of our windows, and now we go to our glass layer and we actually create our glass. So I'm just going to say line. I'm going to create a line here on the outside and on the inside. I also want to have two lines always here in the middle to show that it's basically a glass layer. And the way that I would do that is I would just select those, or there's a multiple way that you can do that. I want to use the tween curves method, and I'm going to say the start curve and the end curve, and then I'm going to say I need two numbers. Press enter, and you see that I have now created my glass here. Now I want to make sure that these two guys are going to hidden, so I just go here and say change object layer. So I have my hidden lines, and I am pretty good to go. This is my basic setting of my window. Now, the last thing that I want to do before I actually create this block is to say that I need to have a base point. Now, the base point is very important if you're working with blocks, because that will always position and orient your block. If you're copying it, you want to rotate it, etc., it will always reference the positioning of those base points. So you want to make sure that you're very, very careful and very strategic about placing that. So I'm just going to say point. I make sure that I go to my base point layer here, and I want to position it right now in the middle on the lower end of this instance. I'm going to position that in such a way, and that is, like I said, basically my block settings. What I want to do now is actually, that's very important, that I want to create this block on the layer window, not on the layer base point, etc. The master block should be on a layer that makes sense. So if you have a block layer with some nested layers, always make sure that it goes to the master layer. And this, in this case, is my windows. Now let's create the block. So I will just type in block. This will say then select objects to define as a block. Now I will select everything that I have just drawn. So my frames, my glass, my base point, my hidden lines. I press enter, and now it will ask me place block base point. Now because I have defined a base point, I will reference that point, because that is the way that I want to always Rhino to know how to reference it. I say it, and then you will have a pop-up window where you can actually define the name of your block. Now this is again important. Make sure that you just take your time there and just write a name that makes sense. For instance, I would write now 2D small window, and you can go on saying floor plan. So you know, okay, this is a 2D, it's a small window that I'm drawing, and it's basically in the floor plan domain. So it's not a section thing that I'm drawing here, floor plan. And you can always type in some descriptions. And what I used to do is say base point drawn as point for reference. So that just, it's me telling me, hey, if you don't remember where your base point is, I have that already drawn, so just make sure you hit the base point and you can see where the point is. I say okay, and now something has changed, something fundamentally. If I press on one of those objects, you will see it's not a grouped kind of curves cluster, but it's actually now telling me it's one block instance. And that is crucial now. And I want to show you why. Let's say I take this guy and I make some copies. I copy that, copy it here, and I also copy it, let's say here and here, because I'm just placing those things now, yeah? And let's say I was completely wrong about something, or I want to add some detail. Now, if I would have done it with groups or something, if I change something here, I would have to copy it again to those places because, it didn't get updated. The beauty of this is if I would now go inside here and I would, for instance, just take this and move it up for any reasons. Let me just do it by a number. Let's say 0.2 or 0.2. I do this, now I press enter, and you will see that every instance that I have drawn in my Rhino canvas will be updated. Now that means that I can now simply go to this master element, change something there, and everywhere else that I have drawn this object or I have referenced this object, it will be updated. So it's kind of parametric in a sense, but just a little bit more simple. So that's the amazing feature of the block. Yeah, so, and the way that I want to do that, I just double click on my block instance. That will bring up this block edit window. That means now I can again use that to change my geometry. I could scale it up. I could add some more features. I could add objects. I could remove objects. I could set the base point new, etc., etc. But this is just to give you an overview of what you could do with blocks. Of course, there's a lot to say about blocks, but this we will not cover now. But we have created our first block instance. Now we are free to actually continue on. So I'm just going to take this, guys, and I'm going to mirror it with my symmetry axis here. So I also have them placed here. And this is an entrance, so we don't really need to draw something here, but we need our windows also here, right? So again, I could take this, I could copy it the way that that it makes sense. So I've copied it here to this place. I rotate it by -90 in this case, because that's what my gumball is showing me. I move it, but I will have a problem now. The problem now is basically that those small windows are smaller than those windows here, as you can remember. Now, again, beauty of blocks. If you have something similar, you could now say, okay, I have to create a new block, right? And that's what we're gonna do. We're gonna say explode, whatever I have here, explode block, that is. Explode block, it's exploded. Now if you select that, you will again have your curves. Now what we want to do is select everything here and say pon, and I will just more or less stretch that geometry using my reference as those frames here. And this is now my large window. So if I just put this guy back here in the mid, just to make sure that my base point is again on this mid here, I can now again select all of my instance and I say block, and I have to go to the same routine. As you remember, we set the block midpoint, we say now to the larger window. And again, sorry for all the typos that I'm doing here, and I can also say floor plan. And I could again add a description, but you get the idea. I say enter, and now I have another block instance. And if I click on this 2 times, you can see that it's now defined as larger window floor plan. Just follow along, and you could just make a copy here, and this should be good to go, as you can see. Yeah, that is actually quite good. Now we have created blocks and we have placed them for windows, so any update we do, if you want to make it more detailed, etc., we can do now. Okay, so that is good, but the one thing that we have to update now is actually our walls, right? So our walls are kind of not precisely drawn now. They do not take into account that there's a little slit for my windows. What I mean with that is actually I would need to carve out this section here in order to actually display a very detailed and correct wall section. Now, this brings me to another interesting feature, which we will use now to actually correct that. And that is the insert point mechanism. Now, if I want to now detail this a little bit better, I would need to insert some control points. As you know, these are control points, and if I change them, I change the geometry. But if I add some more points to it, I actually could now deform this to whatever I want, right? So that's what we're going to do now. So I'm just going to type in insert. If you do insert, you will have insert control points, and that's what I want to do, insert control points. You select your geometry, and then you just insert your control points, and I'm going to insert them wherever I have an intersection with my frames. I press enter, and now I can say pon, and you can see that I have now more control points, and that will enable me to actually take this corner point here and move it to my new frame corner point. I press enter, or I just break out of it. And if I select now my wall, you can see it has this T shape, which is a little bit more precise if you want. Yeah. And now we can continue on. So maybe I'm gonna fast forward this because I don't want to stay too long here. So I say insert control point, and I'm just gonna quickly do that for all other wall types. Okay, so there you go. Now we have created a more detailed, let's say, section where we have the frames that actually cut into the wall section, and this has been modeled in a very, let's say, more detailed way. Now let's continue on. Hey, thank you for watching this video. If you like the content, please give me a thumbs up and subscribe to my YouTube channel. And also please check out my new online learning platform, designupgrade.thinkofic.com. Here you can watch half of the content for free. Just sign up and you will have it beautifully structured. So thank you very much, and I hope you made some design upgrades.